Thank you all for coming. Before we get started, I just want to do a few brief introductions, and I'm going to first introduce our fire chief, Chief Palvermacher, to cover a few things about the facility.
Yeah, well, welcome everyone to Fire Station number 1. I wanted to do a brief introduction. I'm not going to be able to spend time with you tonight. We have a Dane County Fire Chiefs meeting tonight, so leaving you in the capable hands of the police department. However, I did want to just briefly give you an idea of where you're at right now. This isn't just our headquarters station. You're sitting in our emergency operations center, so in the event that we were to have something of significance that required a lot of different agencies to respond into our city, we would be coordinating that out of this room. And so it was a natural fit to be able to host this briefing today based on the fact that this is a public space intended for something like this. Other than that, your fire department is open to you as well. If you ever have any questions about the services that are provided to you, feel free to reach out. Our contact is available through the city's website, and I'd be happy to have those meetings as well. I know that you're not here for the fire department, so I'll turn it back over to Lieutenant Harwig, and welcome to the fire station.
All right, thank you, Chief. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ned Hartwick. I'm a lieutenant with the Fitchburg Police Department. I have had the pleasure of meeting with several of you in the room as members of the Seminole Hills Estates Neighborhood Association for, gosh, I don't know, probably the last 6 or 7 years. I've come to your regular neighborhood association meetings to talk about what's going on in the neighborhood and the community. Also with us this evening is Chief Morales from the police department. Dane County District Attorney Ozanne has also joined us. And I also want to take a moment to introduce John Stincy, who is in the back here. He is the co-president of the Seminole Hills Estates Neighborhood Association. I mentioned their neighborhood association on a couple of occasions here just because the bulk of these incidents and the first wave of these incidents that we're going to talk about this evening primarily occurred in that neighborhood association. So we enjoy the partnership with all of our neighborhood associations, and we rely on those associations to take in information, share information, and really be our eyes and ears. So with that, I want to turn it over to Chief Morales.
Hello everyone, I know time is precious, and I know many of you are here probably after work or in between other obligations. I just want you to thank you for being here. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I just want to thank a few people. I want to thank Fire Chief Joe Palvermacher for allowing me to use this space where we can convene and share some information with you. In addition, I want to thank and am honored to have DA O'Shane here, who it's rare, he is so busy, it's rare to have him at a meeting. So we are truly blessed to have him here, as busy as he is handling all of Dane County, to be here to answer some questions. In addition, yes, I am your chief, but one of the heavy lifters on the department is Ned Harwick, who's going to be doing this presentation. So I'm going to let him take charge and help answer the questions. At the end of this presentation, if there's any further questions that he cannot answer, I cannot help you with, we will make sure that we follow up with you individually to get that to you. So again, thank you very much for being here. And Ned, we'll let you take it away.
So I just want to start out again, as we kind of get into this here, talk about the fact that we like to meet regularly with the community. And again, with neighborhood associations, with our police district meetings that we've been having throughout this year, and unfortunately, we don't always get a high turnout. And that can be a good and a bad thing. We often experience our highest turnout at meetings like this when something bad has happened in the community. And it is our duty to be here to provide this information to you, but we always love to have the opportunity to meet with you before things like this occur so we can share information and really work on our partnership, because again, we do rely on you, we serve you, we have the honor and privilege of serving you, we're responsible to you, and so we'd like to know what's going on in the community. So as Chief Morales said, we appreciate the fact that you all took time out of your evening to come here tonight and learn about what's going on. Before we get started, I want to cover what we're actually actually going to accomplish tonight? Okay, so tonight we are going to provide accurate information. We are blessed in the area that we're in to have constant communication and connection through things like Nextdoor and Facebook. Unfortunately, some of those sources don't always have accurate information, and it's very easy for things to sometimes spiral out of control, and for inaccurate information to get out there. So tonight we're going to provide the accurate information. The important thing to note with that is that this is an open investigation, so we are going to provide the accurate information that we can at this point. Okay, we understand there's questions, people may have bits of information, but we're going to provide what we can at this point. We're also going to discuss next steps, and that's something that is still in the works with the District Attorney's Office. But really, most importantly, we're here to listen. As I indicated, we're responsive to the community, we're responsible to you, and we're here to listen to your concerns and hear what impact these incidents have had on you and your neighbors. And also, of course, we're going to answer questions to the best of our abilities. Again, recognizing this is an open investigation. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of the timeline here. On September 2nd, on Saturday, keeping in mind this is a busy Labor Day weekend, we received our first report of damage to a vehicle in the neighborhood. Now, we don't take a large number of reports like this, but it's not out of the ordinary for us to take a report where a vehicle may be damaged. And usually that is a single incident where someone typically knows that person, they're intentionally damaging that vehicle due to some sort of dispute or problem that's going on. So one incident in of itself isn't necessarily something that's out of the ordinary, a cause for alarm. Monday morning, Labor Day, we had a number of phone calls and what I refer to really as a wave of reports. I think within the first hour of individuals waking up, we had 7 or 8 reports of damage to property. And then on Tuesday, we were able to identify and interview the suspect, a person that we believe is responsible for all of these incidents. And on Tuesday, September 5th, we issued a notice to appear, and we'll talk about what that is here, to the suspect. So on Tuesday, we identified that suspect, and that suspect was really only able to be identified through your assistance. We received, within hours of taking these reports, we received a lot of images, a lot of videos coming from your doorbell cameras and your home surveillance systems. 10 years ago, it's likely that we would not have been able to identify this person and have any contact with them. But going through just about any neighborhood and just about any house, you see some type of surveillance system, whether that's a doorbell camera, and we go to some houses where we see every corner, every nook and cranny of a house is covered in surveillance cameras. Now, I think sometimes that could be a sad commentary on the state of affairs across our country, that we feel that we have to cover our homes in surveillance cameras, because I will tell you that overall our community is very safe. Much like Dane County, it's a safe place to be, it's a safe place to raise a family. But when incidents like these happen, they're alarming and they're concerning, and they understandably can put a lot of fear into a community. But again, I will remind you that it is through your help and cooperation that we were able to identify this person. It was also through the work of one of our officers in reviewing calls for service and police contacts in the neighborhood that we were really able to identify this person and go directly to that person just a day after this first wave of incidents occurred. So on Tuesday, we interviewed that suspect and we collected a lot of evidence during that interview. As I have reported previously and has been reported in the media and social media, that person that we identified as a 20-year-old, they are a resident of the neighborhood. Now, you might ask why I'm sharing that information, why the police department has shared that information. I think it's important to note, because of the fact that this is not a person that is coming into your neighborhood to carry out these acts. It is a person that lives in your neighborhood as part of your neighborhood family, if you will. And I think sometimes in our neighborhoods, we are disconnected from each other, and we think of each other as our own individual family unit, and we may not pay attention to what our neighbors are doing or even what their names are. And so I just bring that up because I would like Fitchburg to be a place where we're all connected, where our neighborhoods are connected, and we look out for one another. And so this is one of the reasons why we're discussing the fact that this person involved is a resident of the neighborhood. I mentioned that our review of police reports and previous contacts, we were familiar with this person. And in our familiarity, there are no reported similar acts or other threats to public safety. So we'll talk about why that becomes important here in just a second. And although it doesn't do anything to diminish the impact that some of the things specifically that were carved into these vehicles or other property damage, there is zero evidence that any vehicle or any property or any homeowner or anyone in the neighborhood was specifically targeted. So after we conducted the interview with this person and collected evidence and really sat down to assess where we were with this investigation, we needed to make an assessment as to next steps. Now, it's important to note that in almost every situation where a crime is involved, as police officers, we have discretion. And we have discretion for a number of reasons. Because in every situation, there are a variety of factors to take into account. And so one of those factors or one of those considerations is what is best for everyone involved. Because in this overall situation, we have a number of people that have reported damage to their property. We have a suspect and their family to take into account. We have other stakeholders that have to be involved in this process, including the district attorney's office, our police department, and everyone else that is connected to this situation. We also then had to discuss and consider the next steps in this process, and we'll talk about those next steps in just a second. And then we also have to take into account when we're looking at this person involved, some factors that may be in their background that may have contributed or be a part of this overall situation. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here. So I'll get out in front of the question that's been posed out there is why wasn't a physical arrest made? So the purpose of a physical arrest is to bring the person involved before a court, okay? And as part of the evaluation as to whether or not that physical arrest is necessary, we have to take into account the suspect's known history. So I mentioned that we did have some history with that suspect, but that history can be a number of different things, okay? That could include past incidents of similar conduct. In this instance, we did not have any reports of that. We have to take into account the fact that these are property crimes. Okay, we have a number of incidents of gun violence and other acts against other people that happen in our community, and so I'm not trying to diminish the fact that these are property crimes. However, no one was injured. There certainly does not diminish the fear that some of these crimes put into the community, but we do take into account the type of crimes. And perhaps one of the most important factors that we have to consider is the threat to public safety, and specifically the ongoing threat to public safety. If we don't make an arrest, we often have to consider, is this behavior likely to occur? And what factors are there that may stop that from happening again in the future? And is an arrest critical in that? And the last consideration on here is the existence of support systems. So are there other mechanisms in place that can help us be fairly confident that this activity is not going to continue to occur? So these are all the factors. These are all happening in real time, literally as we are out interviewing this person. And I'll stand before you and say that I was the person that is making this evaluation, okay? These are all things that are happening in real time again and running through these factors, and they're not made, these decisions are not made alone and they're not made lightly. But we have to take into account all of these factors, not only in this situation, but any incident that we get involved in where an arrest may be necessary. So I talked a little bit about the process here. So the process that occurs, and this is part of the assessment here, is an arrest, a referral, or an intake really that's sent out up to the district attorney's office, triggers a review by their office. And once that is up there, they have, if a physical arrest is made, for example, they have 24 to 48 hours to make their decision. And as I reported, we have over 30 incidents that we have to take into account. So those are 30 different incidents that we have to look at, make sure all that information is accurate, so that the DA's office, when they get that information, they're making an appropriate decision based on the information that they have in front of them. So I can tell you that that is a lot of work. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse or a reason, but that is a consideration for us to go through all of these reports, ensure the accuracy, and that includes things like estimated damage. That includes making sure all the other information, including the surveillance video footage, is attached to those, so when the district attorney is reviewing that, they have that information in front of them and can make appropriate decisions. And then from there, potential charges are considered by the district attorney's office, and then there becomes some additional assessments in there, including things like bail conditions. So again, going back to this evaluation, all of these things come into play when we're making this decision whether or not a physical arrest is appropriate. So now, here we are, a week later, and this is what we know now, okay? These aren't things that we necessarily knew for sure then, but now we've had time to go through these things, and we have a detective, an officer, and our court liaison officer that are still going through all of these instances to review these cases and make sure that the information is accurate and that we've really captured everything that has gone on in this spree of incidents. So we have over 30 individual cases, so that means 30 individual homes or vehicles that have been impacted. There's been damage reported to vehicles. The bulk of the damage to vehicles were slashed tires. Okay, now clearly that's an issue from a safety perspective and just repairing that damage. There were also quite a few vehicles that had various words, phrases, or symbols carved into them, and those are extremely expensive repairs to have made to any vehicle. There were also homes that were damaged. And property, residential property, pool covers, volleyball nets, patio furniture, or a variety of things. The overwhelming majority of the property of these instances were property damage, things that were just cut or carved, and so that's the bulk of the damage. There was also some damage to city property at McKee Farms Park. These incidents all involved a sharp tool, and in some occasions a BB gun was used to damage a vehicle. I will address here the BB gun in so much as the video surveillance footage that circulated and obviously and understandably instilled some fear. In some of the video footage, when this person approached a door, you can see a firearm in that person's waistband. Okay, and so we have determined that is a BB gun. There's an estimated over $40,000 worth of damage, and that is based on estimates. Now, if anyone's had any damage to their vehicle in any form, we know that everything related to vehicle repairs is extremely expensive. And so a lot of that damage, that dollar amount, comes from vehicle damage. We also discovered through piecing these things together, talking to neighbors, getting surveillance video footage, there has been a small amount of theft of mail and packages. So that was another component that was not known to us originally. I touched on this briefly, but I will reiterate it. We have no reason, zero reason, to believe that any individuals or groups were targeted. I'll reiterate that one more time. No reason to believe that anyone or any groups were targeted for any particular reason. We had shared, the police department had shared in the original press release that some of the damage to vehicles included hate symbols, offensive words, and threats. And so some questions were posed as to why these weren't considered a hate crime. And I won't read everything here related to the hate crime statute. However, the hate crime statute basically requires that the person involved intentionally selects whom they are targeting, and based on their belief or perception regarding the factors described here. And again, we don't have any reason to believe that that occurred. And that is based on the interview and also just in investigating further what property was damaged and where that was damaged. Based on our interview and investigation and mapping all these instances out, it really appears that the primary focus was just destruction of property with no real intent, specific intent that we can identify. So as far as next steps, there are recognizing there are victims of these crimes in the room, recognizing there are community members who have been impacted by fear, recognizing that there are people that just have questions in general. What are the next steps? So as I alluded or mentioned, there are a number of reports for us to review, factors that we have to have accurate in order to get up to the district attorney's office. And a lot of that hinges on values, because depending on the value, that changes the type of offense. So we have to ensure everything is accurate. Then our reports and a form have to be sent to the district attorney's office. And from there, that is when the district attorney's office begins reaching out to victims to trigger some processes related to victim rights and exchanging information with everyone that has been impacted by this. So from there, then the review of reports is conducted, and charging decisions would be made by the district attorney's office. So I recognize that I probably didn't answer every single question that you may have. And I certainly have not had the opportunity to hear from everyone in here. And so this is really what this meeting is about, is hearing from you, listening to you, and answering the questions again to the best of our ability at this point. We have the district attorney here as well to help shed any light if you have any questions specific to processes, but please recognize that he has not reviewed any of these reports, and nor has anyone in his office. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Who's going to be financially responsible for the damages incurred?
So,
Because you're a little light at 40 grand, because my house is 17,000 just by itself.
so the person or the individual would be responsible for restitution. So after a person would be convicted or plead or have a trial, restitution would be addressed by the court.
What if he's deemed mentally incompetent?
I am not aware that that is an issue at this point. If it was, we would address that. Crime victims' compensation could be accessed by some of you or all of you if you want to go down that road. At times, that is a way that people get paid quicker, and then they assume the burden of the restitution, so the person would have to pay them back. If your insurance company pays you, then they technically are a victim, so then they actually also can seek restitution from the individual. I can't tell you it's going to be quick. Most people don't have that kind of money sitting around. But we do try and see if people can get their restitution as quickly as possible, but we don't obviously control how much an individual makes. And they're saying this individual is 20. It's not likely that he's making a large amount of money at this point, but I don't know his financial situation.
But he lives at home. Are his parents liable then? Or is
Since
it
he is
just on him?
20, since he is 20,
He's an adult.
he is an adult, or he would be seen as an adult, so the responsibility would fall to him. I don't know if he has family that would help him.
Lieutenant, there's been some question about his mental capabilities or, I don't know, the scuttlebutt is that, to put it lightly, he's playing with a euchre deck He has some issues.
Well,
He's not
at
fully
this
mentally
point,
competent.
at this point, we would be looking at whether or not somebody would be able to be competent to go to trial, basically help their attorney understand the process, understand the system. And it's my understanding that that isn't an issue at this point. I don't know to the extent that it might become an issue or someone might raise it, but at this point, I don't believe, at least I had not heard that would be.
Thank you.
So clearly this is, whoever the family is, it's very sad and very devastating for that family. And I, as a citizen, Mr. District Attorney, would fully expect you to prosecute and hold accountable this person. I think the next step, though, is how can we be ensured, not guaranteed, but ensured that this doesn't happen a week from now, a month from now, the anniversary of Labor Day. I think, I don't want to speak for the group, I know I hate you people, but I think we all want to be assured that this isn't going to happen again and again and again and again.
Well, I think if law enforcement thought that there was a risk that this behavior was going to continue, they likely would have taken another step with this individual to separate him from the community. So I'm assuming that there are some checks or supports in place that have allowed this to sort of be it, and we haven't heard of any other incidents. Listen, I will tell you this. I understand when something happens at your home or near your home, how that affects your sense of safety and security. All right? I wish I didn't feel or have that experience, but I do because people came to my own home. That said, I am certain that they would do everything in their power to ensure this doesn't happen again. And had they thought there was a risk, I think they would have taken another step to remove that individual. So we can never say there's a guarantee, okay? I don't know how many of you remember about 5 or 6 years ago, we had this sort of thing happen on the near west side over by Memorial. That ended up being 5 Memorial students. How they thought it was a decent idea or a good idea to go out and do what they did all over those neighborhoods, I don't know. The result for them, none of them had criminal histories at the time. We looked to try and get them into diversion and get restitution paid. And I think probably the majority of it was paid. I think there might be one individual that still owes some money on that, maybe $800. But that was a large amount of property damage as well. Now, I'm not saying that this is the same individual situation because law enforcement knows the individual. That means there might have been other contact with the system. So we would look at figuring out, is the person willing to accept responsibility? Are they willing to try and repair the harm? Obviously, this is a large amount of harm, and this is only one individual. It's a little bit of a different situation, but I think law enforcement is going to do everything they can to ensure that this doesn't happen again, at least with this individual.
Great answer. I guess I'd like to hear from the lieutenant, though.
Yeah.
The DA assumed that everything was relatively safe.
Mm-hmm.
You had interviewed. Can you assure us that this is just a nothing burger from here on out?
Well, as the district attorney indicated, I can't provide 100% certainty, but I can tell you, going back to the portion of my presentation here where we talk about the evaluation and what things we consider. I mentioned the existence of support systems. I can tell you that when these instances occurred, the primary support system in place, without giving too much information, was not present. Okay? So I can tell you that obviously bringing this to the support system's awareness, that support system will be present, and I have no doubt that that will be present. I can't guarantee that system alone will guarantee that this won't occur again, but I believe in conjunction with the process moving forward here with the district attorney's office and the existing support systems that are out there, I would have a high degree of comfort that this likely would not occur again. Is that fair enough?
Yeah. Not looking for a guarantee, just looking for a little bit of assurance.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. I don't know what diversion is, so if you could define that. And the second question I have is, and I don't want an answer to this, I'm going to preface it. If this young, I'm going to say man, youth, 20-year-old adult, is mentally competent but has issues, could part of the way this is handled, because she is an adult, they are an adult, so they can refuse it if it wasn't an issue like this. Could they be compelled in some way to get help if that were part of the thing that fed into this?
So,
Treatment, see therapy, inpatient, whatever, just so that they would have a better feel for themselves and maybe not have some sort of recidivism.
so we could never really force somebody to, say, participate in counseling, but that can definitely be part of the offer to an individual. There are times when we have actually had individuals who are sort of within that Chapter 51 area, which is basically, in order to comply with treatment for their safety and safety of the community. There are times when they have, say, an imbalance in their medication and something happens. In those instances, we have entered into agreements with individuals because they basically have the ability to agree to an extension about every 6 months. We've said if you agree to an extension of 18 months to 2 years, that's typically the length of time we would need to have certainty that they're going to stay on their medication, they're going to be constant with their treatment. We will not issue charges. Okay, so there are things that we do take into consideration. We don't want to pull anyone with mental health issues into the criminal justice system if we don't have to, but we also don't have any control over what they may or may not do unless we pull them in. So, to answer your question about diversion would be traditional system. We pull you in, we charge you for whatever we believe the law violation is. We convict you either through a trial or you enter a plea. We ask the judge to sentence you to probation, to jail, to prison. That would be the traditional system. Diversion could be sort of anything prior to pulling you in. There is pre-trial diversion, which basically means we wouldn't charge the individual. We would send them to the diversion program, either the community restorative court, which some of you may know about, some of you may be peacekeepers, with that or trained with that, and basically they're usually a circle model to do restorative justice, where victims would be able to participate and speak with the individual, talk about what the repair harm agreement would be, talk about how it impacted them, how it impacted the community, and hear from that other individual. That other individual would have to accept the responsibility for their actions and would have to have a meaningful discussion, and all would agree what should be done to repair the harm and potentially get the benefit, which would be a dismissal of the charges or never issued charges if they successfully completed. We can do post-charge. If cases are a little more serious, we don't feel that moving someone in pre-charge is appropriate, we charge the individual. That can be charged with a felony, misdemeanor. Obviously, all of this would be a felony level incident for the most part. You're home alone. $2,500 is usually the barrier that gets us into felony level incidents, except for retail thefts now. $500 is a felony. That wasn't us. That was others that decided to make it that, because I've never really seen people get out of stores without more than $500. Here, other places, they take the whole store. Post-charge, we charge them. They go through a diversion. Either sometimes it could be the CRC or it's our deferred prosecution program. If they successfully complete, they could have a dismissal. They could have only a misdemeanor conviction. Because he's under 21, I believe, he still would have expungement accessible to him for certain low-level felonies if he was convicted of a felony. But that's a way that someone can accept responsibility, move to repair harm, and then get the benefit of not having a criminal record for the rest of their life.
Thank you.
We're over here. I view the entire conversation totally academic. I lost over I lost north of $20,000 worth of damage. Out of 40, I would have to say I'm the majority. But I really don't care about the perpetrators. I really don't care about restitution. Everyone in here is heavily insured. And even though I lost over $20,000, that's not out of my pocket. That's why we have insurance. My concern is there's a feed-forward concept. And that has to do with this neighborhood assisting the police in doing their job. They can't be everywhere. They can't be sniffing out any whack job that wants to just go out and start slicing at people or slicing at convertible tops. The concept that I designed for my brother in Seattle was very simple and very straightforward. It was a four-corner detection system. They had the same issues, but it was repeatedly, hence repeating. Four-corner system, and what it did, it literally tracked a human through the neighborhood within a certain time frame. And this information went right directly to the police department. The police department could not take any automated information. It had to come from a human, so we had to go through the security company. And it knew the difference between a cat and a dog, and it knew the difference between a human, and it was $350 per household. Cheap, considering, because it come down to safety also. And crime stopped because the police would get an alarm, would come in as an email, the technology has changed. And with that email was a video of the interloper. And as that individual went through the neighborhood, each camera would pick them up and they could track it. And they could track the number of them. And it was a tremendous tool for the police. Didn't require sirens. They just showed up, and there they were in front of his progression. This neighborhood has an excellent opportunity in complaining about what has happened. It's totally senseless. We're not going to get restitution out of this poor guy. If he does this, he's got a serious problem. There's nothing normal about this kind of behavior. So if you say that he's mental, well, he's not normal. And anytime you're into vandalism, I understand theft. You get something out of it. Vandalism is senseless. What's in it for him? It's vengeance. It'll only escalate. So at this point, I would really challenge this neighborhood to take a look at a security system that the neighborhood incorporates. It's just engineering, for goodness sakes. I just tore out my entire security system and upgraded it to my level of my brother's. And I've got everything under control. And it'll send all that information to wherever the police chief decides it to go, either to the police department, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend that this neighborhood pop for a security system, which all that information goes to them. So the next time we have a situation like that, the security system will contact the police, and the police will then get a direct feed of what's going on in this neighborhood. We put a man on the moon, it only took a budget. Why? This is an opportunity. It's a wake-up call. Talking about restitution, give it up. As far as what they're going to do to them, that has nothing to do with us. That has to do with their legal system. And so I really think that what should happen, work with Al and we'll come up with a system, and if the neighborhood wants it, they can buy it. Now they can feel safe. It's a feed-forward system. Don't worry until the accident happens, until the crime happens, and then all of a sudden you're going to do something about it. You can't do anything about it. It's like trying to see a head-on collision in your rear-view mirror. Senseless. So, any more conversations? I really think should be that don't let this happen again. We're too smart. We have the wherewithal, and we have a fantastic police department. Let's just do it. Like I said, we put a man on the moon. It just took a budget. I think we can safeguard our neighborhoods, and it doesn't take dogs or guns.
Well, that's an issue for the Seminole Hills Association. That I don't think that's appropriate for this right now.
I can't hear you at all, DJ.
I said that's a matter for the whole association to talk about.
Associations and associations might as well belong to a car club. It's each individual concerned about their safety. Each individual has to be concerned about themselves. It's not that you become an organization and you want to do a group think. I didn't really care what anybody thought about what I was going to do, but I'm done.
Thank you for the comments. And I think, a couple of key points that you bring up here is, and things that we try to accomplish in every neighborhood, in every community, and I'd really love to see across the city, is a connected neighborhood that communicates, and whether that's through the form of technology, whether that incorporates technology. But I think, again, when we look at our modern neighborhood, we may know which type of cars our neighbors drive. We may know their routine when they pick up their newspaper, but I see more and more, again, we don't know our neighbors' names, and we don't know how to get a hold of them if something's wrong, if their garage door is left open, things like that. And so I think, if positive things can come out of this, I know the Seminole Hills Estates Neighborhood Association is already fairly networked, and that's due in part due to the Neighborhood Association board, folks like John that come together and people meet. It is probably one of the more widely attended neighborhood association meetings, but I think one of the most successful means that neighborhoods and groups of residents can really address situations like this and improve neighborhood safety is by just being connected and communicating. And obviously with modern technology, and as I alluded to 10 years ago, this crime would have probably never been solved certainly as quickly as it did without that. But you're also mentioning preventing it and stopping it while it's in the act, and that's the balance to be had in conversations for everyone to consider. Yes, sir.
Is there, or do you think there was escalation in somebody getting hyped because of what they did? You said 1 the first night, 10 or 12 the next night. The shooting that happened in Seminole Hills was behind my house 12 years ago. And, they killed the guy in the house, different circumstances, everything else. If someone approaches my front door with a BB gun stuck down their pants, I won't be calling you. They would call someone else. Because I take myself and my family very seriously. I'm concerned with this individual. Is someone watching this individual, whoever he is, he or she, I don't really care, to deprive them of the opportunity to do this at the next level. Because I live in downtown New Orleans. I went to the camera system. My face is on every camera in New Orleans. And there was a huge issue on, John said, in that information, was that an intended invasion of privacy of that person walking down the street, not someone who's down there shopping, every day. But they turned part of those cameras off. And it was, as I said, it was voluntary. Not every camera. Police didn't have access. That is a solution. I've heard of it. It works in certain circumstances. I'm concerned about the individual, and is there this rise in escalation and thrill from the next one.
I just want to answer that, and I want to go a little deeper. We can never make guarantees. And even if we were to take the person into custody, would they be held in custody is the next question. Because the days have already come and gone, which means whatever decision would have been made that day, whether to take into custody or not, that person would be out in the streets today. So when you're asking for a guarantee, there is no guarantee, or to say, is this person a threat to the public? Well, we made our decision back then of that person not being a threat. Otherwise, we would have removed that person from the community. So just to answer that question, there's no guarantees, but we feel safe. We feel confident that that person is not. The one thing I want to bring up is, and please don't take this the wrong way. I enjoy these meetings. We enjoy these meetings. The police are the community. We are you. If I take this uniform off, I sit next to you and know if I was a police officer or not. I'm saying that for a reason. We have community meetings every month. How many people showed up for our last month meeting?
2.
2 people. You only show up for during a time of crisis. Information is power. An informed community, there's very smart answer on your solution to this problem. There's probably 10 other solutions to this problem amongst you all. I call it problem-oriented policing. Let's talk, discuss, let's meet. If you can't come to a community meeting, invite us to your association meetings. I enjoy the conversations, whether through a cup of coffee or through a meeting like this, to solve problems. You are part of the solution. When we have these meetings, but they shouldn't always be in crisis. There should be time when times are good. We discuss information. We have data. We pull a ton of data that we use for our presentations to council, our presentations to the district attorney's office, the U.S. attorney's office, to get cases through that need to be done, to our police and fire commission. We have data to share with you regarding your community. But if you don't communicate with us in good times, then we're only going to meet in bad times and expect a solution right now. I'm hoping that this does not happen. I'm hoping this will be something of the past and resolve it. You're 100%. Insurance companies are going to take this over, and insurance companies are going to be a part of the problem to the district attorney's office saying, hey, what are we going to do here? We need to get paid. But at the end of the day, what do we do from here on out? Because you should be aware, and in addition to that, you are a voting party for Fitchburg. We are your resource. You should know more about us. And today in 1 hour, you're not going to get all of that. But I'm willing to commit our department to you to spend time with you. You being one of the many community groups here in Fitchburg. I enjoy working for you. And I enjoy the way you ask questions. I told the DA, the world that I came from, there would have been about 4 or 5 four-letter words already done in the first couple of minutes from where I came from. And something probably would have been thrown. Your questions are well thought out, and there's nothing we cannot solve together with this type of participation. I'm very proud and humbled to be a part of your community and work through these problems. Yes, ma'am.
I've known Officer Hartwick for years. He's always attended our Seminole Hills Neighborhood Association meetings and given us tremendous information. Always talked about getting to know our neighbors and keeping our neighborhood safe, and it has worked very well. I had a minor incident, but the thing that concerns me is that my son's car was keyed on Saturday night leading into Sunday, actually 5:30 in the morning on Sunday. So I guess my question to you is, are you sure that you have all of the incidents? I know that the major wave, the escalation, so to speak, was Sunday night into Monday. But there was an incident with our next door neighbors who interacted with this young person because they were walking home at 3 a.m. and found him between our two houses. Are you sure? There's also a thing on next door about a similar kind of carving on the back hood of a covered car that occurred on Friday night.
Friday night into Saturday?
Friday night into Saturday. So I know that the car that was keyed on Friday night into Saturday was in front of my house. So we know he was there on Saturday on Bossard. We know he was there on Sunday. And we know that he moved up Bossard and up into Treeline area Sunday night into Monday. The video that I have from him walking up my driveway is disconcerting. He's calm. He walks up, he pulls out a device, he scribbles, he calmly puts it back in his pocket. It was like 90 degrees that weekend. He's covered with a hoodie and a backpack, very, very well dressed. And he proceeds to walk up into my backyard and then cut across up to go up behind Golden Terrace. But it was the calm, it was the poise. that was disconcerting. It wasn't a bunch of kids fooling around. It was the calm. It's the calm that's on that next door video that's disconcerting. The way he flips up the cover, does his little graffiti, and then folds the cover neatly back. So that's what I'm asking you. I know that you know everything that happened on Sunday night into Monday, but do you know what he was doing the nights leading up to this? Leading up to the escalation on Sunday night into Monday?
I can't say with 100% certainty, and
I trust you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say to this whole group, if you interviewed him, and I trust you because you have been talking to us for years. I trust you when you say that you don't think it's going to be another incident is going to be occurring down the road. But at the same time, that's a lot to swallow. I mean, I had the drug dealer next door to me 10 years ago, and you guys took me seriously about the 5th call, and you arrested him and, and got him the help that he needed. It's still disconcerting.
And absolutely, and every time my home camera system goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning, I look at that with fear, just knowing what occurs at 3 o'clock in the morning, what we respond to, and what I could potentially see. Even as a police officer that, has access to firearms and feels fairly confident in defending himself, so I can only imagine what happens when you see that. I can only imagine then the impact then when that circulates on Nextdoor and on Facebook and gets around, and that easily impacts everybody. To answer your question specifically, I very, very lightly touch on the timeline, but we know that there were multiple incidents that were reported to us, and again, reported to us Saturday morning that likely would have occurred sometime over Friday night into Saturday morning. Okay. There were also, I believe, a couple of incidents that were reported to us going into Sunday morning, and then the larger wave that came in on Monday morning. Now, again, we also ran into situations where people were out of town. It was a Labor Day weekend, so then things trickled in and were reported, and we don't necessarily have a good timeline as to when those occurred. But I can assure you that one of the reasons why we've been so thorough with this is because there are a lot of reports that came in, and we want to make sure to look at each factor that's involved there to link them to this series. So we're looking at anything that's been reported to us, we're taking a look at for consideration into this series of incidents. Again, with that big caveat of what has been reported to us. And I can't emphasize this enough, whether it is this series of incidents, and I repeat to you at the neighborhood association meetings all the time, we rely on you to be our eyes and ears. What is going on in the neighborhood? We can respond. We are responsible to you to respond what is reported to us. Obviously, we go out and we actively patrol the neighborhoods, but if you've been to our neighborhood meetings, you know that we often only have 4 police officers on duty, especially in the overnight hours, patrolling our 36 square miles. So we can't be everywhere at once, and we rely on you to report those things. So we have put out a couple of times. If you have not reported these incidents, please report them to us, because even if it is just a video clip of a person walking through your yard, or if this were another incident and maybe something wasn't taken from your car, you don't necessarily know that maybe your neighbor's home was burglarized and something very serious occurred, and that video footage of the person in that car could be critical in identifying them. So we have spent a great deal of time looking at all these incidents, so I'm fairly confident, and based on what you're describing to me, I've reviewed all of these reports individually, so I'm fairly confident we're there.
Okay, thank you.
So you had a question, but before you ask it, I just want to note that a member of our crime response team is here, Layla. She can connect you to trauma-informed care or counseling. If you know kids that were impacted by this, if you want them to be connected, you can connect to our crime response and we can help sort that out. So she is here as a resource as well.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say, I can't speak for everyone, but we do really appreciate your time and commitment to addressing this and just the community in general. This is kind of I guess this is kind of a multi-part question. Although I agree with you that this is probably an isolated incident. You know, we're assuming it's a 20-year-old, I say this as a young person, I'm 18. I don't own a house in Seminole Hills. I live with my parents. We assume this is someone living with their parents, and if they weren't, you know, taken into custody, where they go back into our neighborhood where this whole thing occurred. I also say this, I was, you know, kind of the guardian of my household when this occurred this weekend. I was with just my boyfriend and my younger brother. You know, my parents weren't home, and our house wasn't impacted, but I just worry, you know, I was like, we're just teenagers, we were upstairs playing video games, like just hanging out. We went to bed really late, and I think, like, what if I had let my dogs out before we went to bed, you know, and he had been in our yard, and he had, you know, not a gun, but weapons, something that could have been used for harm. All these calls came in the morning, no one witnessed this happening, you know, it's all surveillance footage. How was that a threat? You know, were people in danger? Had someone intervened? Had someone, you know, wanted to take matters into their own hands? Had they seen them on their property? It's just, I guess, those are things that we can't really be rest assured about, especially now that they're, you know, back in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the impact, and as I indicated, sometimes it's and you can probably help me out with what the secondary traumatization of really what happens when you're not the direct victim of something, but you hear about it. And
I also say this as, I think that our house didn't get impacted because we're on a tree line, we have a lot of cars parked in the driveway, and we also fell asleep on the couch and then went up to bed and didn't really turn any lights on. So it looked like we were kind of, you know, still waking up, but had something, you know, had someone seen this person or like walked up. He was going up to front and back doors, like he was clearly very close to the actual property. I can't say for certainty that I locked all the doors before we went down to bed for the night. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's just scary.
Yeah, and so again, kind of something that I talk about in all of our neighborhood meetings is the simple crime prevention tips that really become safety tips too, locking all the doors, leaving lights on, reporting things. We had a couple occasions where people actually did cross paths with this individual and through no fault of their own didn't necessarily report it, but people say things like, or ask us questions like, when should I call the police? You know, what constitutes, you know, a call to the police? And I would say anytime you're questioning whether you should call the police, call us. We investigate suspicious behavior and activity. We don't necessarily investigate suspicious people, right? Because what constitutes a suspicious person? But we focus on behavior. So someone walking in between homes at 3 o'clock in the morning with, you know, the neighborhood that you have there is suspicious behavior, right? So that's, again, something we rely on the neighbors, whether you're letting the dog out, you're going out to get the paper, whatever it is, you know, making sure that we're all working together to share that information. But I certainly appreciate the perspective that you're coming from and, you know, thinking about the kind of the what ifs.
My question was, at the point that things were being reported to you, do you communicate to the association, or were people also reporting to the association? When did they hear about these things so that we could get an email and alert the rest of us?
Yeah, and that's so, these are trickling into us. We're evaluating them, linking them, and I think everyone's first thought when you hear that you know, there's these many incidents that occur is that it's, as the district attorney mentioned, a group of people, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense that someone would be out for potentially hours committing these crimes. So the first thought is it's a group of people. So I can't speak to what was communicated to the neighborhood association, and I don't have access, although we're present on Nextdoor, I don't have access to see when people are posting about lost animals and things for sale on the curb or things like that. But you know, I don't know, but it is also a good reminder that simply reporting it to the neighborhood association is no substitute for reporting it to us.
Oh, yeah. So it was, so I was left, Officer Munson left a card on my front door. And when she left the card, she was looking into the car that was keyed on Bossard on Friday night into Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. So that was Monday when I found the card.
Oh, okay.
Or, I'm sorry, it was Sunday afternoon. I went back into my video camera my Ring camera and found that the kid had been on my driveway the next night.
Right.
Because of my connection with the board, we put it out, we sent an email to the board of directors for Sheena, and Nick and John were immediately on it, and there was an email sent out Monday late morning, right?
Yeah, but you had that Sunday, and so, why didn't we get an email Sunday is my question versus, Monday. Like, why wasn't something sent out right away? Hey, just want to let you know, a couple of
Well, I
incidents.
think it's just circumstance that it was my house that was involved. If it had been, if you were on the board and it had been your house that was involved and you had gotten the card from the officer, which I compliment, I mean, she was doing her job, then you would have been able to trigger the email. So I think as soon as the board members knew, they acted on it.
Okay. Well,
But at that time, we didn't know the impact, right?
Right, we had no idea.
Yeah, and I think I started out by, sorry to interrupt, I think, again, when we start getting the first reports here, it's not every day that we get a report like that, but it's not completely out of the ordinary. It's written then when we really start realizing, hey, this was going on for some time, and there's a series of incidents that then we realize, hey, this is something that people need to know about, because if we sent out a notification anytime we had name your, kind of average call.
Well, I mean, our car was stolen years ago, so, right out of our garage. So I have been impacted. I'll say restitution, it was $2,000 out of our pocket, we got $200, okay? So let's all keep that in mind, what you're gonna get back. But I'm just encouraging the neighbors, if anything happens to your home, anything, we should be communicating to our association. Because the more they get that information out to us, the more we can be aware and be on watch for that.
And again, one of the models too that I talk about a lot of times is at least knowing how to get a hold of the neighbor across the street from you, behind you, and on either side of you, because then we hear get a lot of questions about Neighborhood Watch. And I think Neighborhood Watch was a really successful model before the advent of being able to text or go on Nextdoor. But if you at least know how to get a hold of those people around you, then that message can quickly spread around the neighborhood.
The neighborhood watch type thing is, I know, the neighbor on both sides, the neighbors across the street, and so we have our phone numbers and we have text and all that. I found out that I had water flying up into the air on one side of my house because of my neighbor. And I checked and said, Ray, you know you got water just running like crazy? I do. Yeah, I thought I left the water on overnight. I go out and I found out, well, that's the side of the house, but I got the front of the house, where water's also flying like crazy too.
Yeah,
That came out easy in the state with codes.
And so again, no matter the situation, having that ability to easily get in contact with your neighbors can be very helpful.
Do you have a question over there?
Yeah, first, I'd like to compliment the Fitchburg Police Department for the work they've done. I had two neighbors that were vandalized during this process, and they were very complimentary to what you guys did and the actions you took. But the frustrating part was the fact that they know who it is, and the kid is still walking around. And the neighbor right next to me had his house broken into a week before that, before he had his car vandalized. His car was stolen. They stole all his laptops in the house while they were sleeping. And, which I know, it's scary, okay? And you think, okay, these things are happening more and more. And you find out that cars are stolen in this neighborhood, and down this street. And okay, so the point I think we have to take away from this, and I appreciate the compliment, the statements made by some of these guys about networking, because I think that's important. But I think the district attorney, in one of these cases where the car was stolen, there was two 20-year-old kids from the east side and a 15-year-old that is currently going to school at La Follette, and they know who it was, and they were instantly out on bail, the other kid was going to school. And I'm not trying to make a value judgment on a legal system. That's not my point. But when you start hearing about these things, you start thinking, okay, how big a problem is this? And it's a bigger problem than one 20-year-old kid vandalizing 30 cars or whatever we vandalized. And so what I'd like to take away from this is with your suggestions, and your suggestion is this networking thing, because when this happened in my neighborhood in the Highlands of Seminole, some good came out of this, because I was able to, I met more neighbors in the week following these incidents than I had in probably 18 years before that. And I think that's where we're lacking some of this, is this networking and the communication and sending it to our neighborhood association and using some of these technologies that this gentleman brought up. Is that a thing? Maybe, I don't know. But if we don't have discussion, you don't know. And that's the next step here, is to have these meetings and maybe publicize them more. If I didn't listen to Channel 27 tonight on the news, I wouldn't have known this meeting was even happening. And so I think the networks, the new systems next door, all has to be a part of this networking thing, because crime isn't going to go away, right? So we have to figure out how we deal with it, how we minimize the problem, and go on from there. So again, thank you very much for the work you did, and I appreciate the conversation about starting this networking thing and improving on that, because if we don't get that part done, crime isn't going away, and we need to deal with it somehow.
Thank you for the comments, and I'll borrow from the fire department the comments that were made at another meeting that we were attending and responding to yesterday's emergency. And it's really about preparing for something in the future, right? Being prepared, being more resilient, and being able to quickly disseminate information and respond as a community in a way that's appropriate, how your community, your neighborhood wants to respond. And so I really can't emphasize enough. As Chief Morales mentioned, we often have people that come together when there's an emergency, and a lot of times a lot of good happens out of that. People come together and solve problems, and then they go their separate ways. Well, I'm a very big advocate that we come together and we stay together, because not only will it make the neighborhood more resilient and resistant to crime and issues, but just makes your neighborhood a more enjoyable place to be. When you actually know your neighbor, you know their routines, and you can help them out. Alder Herbst, did you have a question?
Well, a comment. First of all, I want to thank you for getting the suspect set up. I know that gave the neighbors comfort knowing it wasn't someone from outside. I sense there's an uneasiness, knowing that he's still there. And I'd like you to, did you consider the factor of rage? I visited many of the homes. I looked at the evidence. One home, they had metal lights, and he ripped them all to the ground, and he cut the wire, and there was rage involved, even though he looked calm, and that's what concerns me. When you talk to him the next day, different story, but I feel there was rage going on. It was strictly property damage, but I'm a little concerned about that. And I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah, nor am I. But we take into account, we talked about a few of the key highlights that we talk about when we were making these decisions. And, some of those things are questions we may never have answered, but we certainly take everything into account, motive and what might be there. But I can tell you that, the overall picture was taken into account when the decision was made. And again, I don't want to say this to make this a minor consideration, but no matter what decision was made on Tuesday, there's a likelihood that this person would have been probably back in the same place that they are right now, with maybe accelerating the district attorney's office to have to make different decisions that may not have been the best decisions for everyone that was impacted, and just unnecessarily accelerated the process. So, certainly, we tried to take into account as many different aspects of this as possible.
You mentioned that these all happened when the individual support was not there.
Mm-hmm.
So How does, so that's just the support system this person has? They're on 24/7, 365?
Well, I can tell you that the support systems are multifaceted with this individual. There are a number of different layers. I can tell you that the support systems in place for this person that would typically be there during when these incidents occurred were not. But obviously, I think if for the parents in the room, if this was your child, obviously this would be very alarming, just as it would be if you're victimized here. And if you think about how, if this was your child we were here discussing, what things you would want to be considered and take into an account. And all of us in here have a unique story, a unique background, unique inputs and outputs that have gone into your lives. And again, going back to the concept of discretion and us having the ability to make a decision instead of treating every single person, this crime is committed, we're going to treat you the same person, the same exact way, and not take into account any of those background things. So in a roundabout way to kind of answer your question, you know, this was, all these things were taken into an account here, and knowing the support systems that are in place and now have a heightened degree of awareness and concern and recognize the role that they play in this situation plays into our confidence in the outcome and the direction that this thing is headed. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions, concerns, feedback, good, bad?
Is there still the potential that he will be arrested?
Well, the potential, the physical arrest, and I think I hope I explained correctly. So the physical arrest really kind of just accelerates the process, and sometimes unnecessarily so, to get that person before a court. Now, an arrest really takes a couple different forms, and I'm not as eloquent in speaking in legal terms and the different outcomes, but yeah.
Yeah, I believe that once we get a referral, we will make a charging decision. So I guess when you hear about an arrest, I mean, I guess it can mean any number of things. It can be a physical arrest where law enforcement actually takes a person to the jail. If they take them there for a misdemeanor offense, a person has the ability to bail out. If they take them for a felony level offense, they will not be released until they go in front of a court commissioner or a judge. If they are arrested before 8 a.m. on, say, a Monday, then they're going to be a must-go basically by Wednesday. So we're going to have about 24 to 48 hours to try and make a charging decision. We wouldn't be able to make a charging decision in 24 to 48 hours if law enforcement doesn't have an ability to get us all of their reports. We would then potentially be having a bail hearing for an individual, and then a court commissioner or a judge would be making a decision as to whether or not they should release the person. Now, with a felony, they might hold them a little longer, but they probably aren't going to hold them more than 2 or 3 days before we would either have to have a complaint filed, which would be a charging decision, or another bail hearing where they're likely going to be released and given an order and date. So that's sort of, we used to have about 4 days before, you know, I think we've all looked at sort of the criminal justice system and said, there is an impact to keeping somebody incarcerated or detained for any length of time before charging. Now, once you've actually charged somebody and you think you have the right person, that decision becomes a little different for a court, but it's still, they're innocent until proven guilty. And if it's a felony level offense, if they're held into a prelim, where we have to prove that it's likely a felony occurred and it's likely that this person did it. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's just basically a probability that we have the right person. We have to give the court something to ensure that we just didn't grab somebody, charge them with a felony, or holding them until they say, you know, uncle, and they actually do whatever we want. We no longer have that. That was part of the reason we all got here. Part of the reason we had a great big war and got away from England, because they did not want debtors' prisons and things like that to occur. So if law enforcement needs to take somebody into custody because of safety to the public, or severity, or they think the person is going to flee, they do that. We will then move as quickly as we can, but we cannot move any faster than they can get us the reports. And that's why when you have this many reports, this much, this widespread, you want to make sure that they have enough time to get everything and then get it to us so we can actually have a review. You could have a situation where, say, your incident was charged, and we would have to wait for all the rest to catch up, and then we would have to charge them and then try and combine them. That's not to say that that doesn't happen. We typically do that, but usually if we can charge it all at once, we'd like to do that.
So generally, to just overall answer your question, yes, there is a likelihood that, not a physical arrest is going to occur, but this, I can tell you with certainty that all these reports will go before them in the same way as if this person had been taken into custody. So the only difference is that this person was not taken to jail. The same process will play out, just with a different timeline, and we are ensuring that everyone, to your other question, is going to be accounted for to give them an accurate picture so they can make the best decision possible.
Thank you.
Sometimes it takes questions from folks like you to help tease out things that I probably should have presented better earlier in the evening, so thank you. Other questions?
I have two questions, and one is very basic. Do we know why he did this?
No.
Okay. My second question is, when the officer came to our house on Monday morning, he asked us to give an estimate. And my husband just threw a figure out there. Well...
Yeah, no, that's not what will stick. There is time to get documentation, but they want to have an idea.
Okay.
Do we think this is likely a felony, or do we think it's a misdemeanor?
Okay.
And that sort of depends on what they refer up to us for that. That's how he was also saying, we know that there's damage to vehicles that's actually a lot higher than what we likely got an estimate for, because you guys aren't going to the body shop every other week. So they know that the level of damage, the cost is a little higher than what they may have gotten through the first meeting with you.
So then, when we do get an accurate replacement or
all of that would come to us.
We call you?
We would then prepare the restitution amounts per incident.
So we call you?
You will have contact from our office, from our victim witness unit. Yes. So Robin can give you that. Crime response a lot of times contacts people before referrals get to us. In this situation, likely what will happen is once we get the referral, we would then put that information into Protect. Protect will generate letters that go out basically indicating an individual was arrested. It will have some information for you, and then how to contact us so you can be informed of court appearances, how to basically get us information about restitution, if you want to make a victim impact statement, how to actually get that to us as well.
And I'll also add too that due to the extent of this case and the fact that we recognize we're just getting estimates, I actually have a couple of department members who are going to be reaching out to everybody again, I think for a third time now, to get and check and see if you have updates to the estimates that we initially prepared.
And just so we're clear, since Marcy's Law passed and actually became part of our Constitution, your rights vested at time of victimization. So you do have the right to make statements at every court appearance that is going to impact your safety, the initial appearance, when someone is actually charged and the court considers bail conditions, or whether to hold somebody in custody. You would have an opportunity to share information at that point if you would like. You don't have to, but you would get information and we would be reaching out to you. Crime response would be trying to reach out to you before the initial appearance. And Robin, if there's anything I missed, feel free to jump in.
Well, I would just say anyone that was a direct victim of this crime, they will hear from our office and we will be reaching out to direct victims. But obviously those that weren't directly victimized are still severely impacted by this. And if that's the case, we have resources for you and we are here to assist you. So I have cards, I have information about crime victim comp. I have all sorts of resources that we have. So please don't be shy to reach out. But those that were directly impacted, we will reach out to you once it gets to the district attorney's office.
I'll also point out too that Officer Topol of the Fitchburg Police Department is here. So if anyone has any information that they haven't reported to us, any evidence that they haven't shared with us, she is here to take that information. But I'll also share that we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by calling our non-emergency number, which if you've ever heard me speak before, I highly, highly recommend that you take the time to program that into your phone right now. Because again, we talked about the fact if you're questioning whether or not you should call the police, the next layer that then goes into your question or consideration is how do I contact the police? And 911 works, but some people have some trepidation about contacting 911 for maybe something that's not clearly an emergency matter. So if you program our non-emergency number, now that number up there for me is my desk line. I work a lot, but I'm not there 24/7. So if you call 270-4300, 4300, you'll get the Fitchburg Police Department dispatcher that's on duty, and they can dispatch an officer. You can talk to a supervisor, you can leave a voicemail message, whatever you need to do. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, you are out at 1 o'clock in the morning letting your dog out and you see something suspicious, you see suspicious behavior, activity, call us and help us out. We'll get there, we'll triage the situation and address it as it needs to be addressed. But again, Officer Topol is here to take any information, and you can contact us with any questions along the way of this process.
One more in the back.
Yeah, just real quick, when you said that you talk with a person, and the question over here, that on the video camera, the individual appeared very calm, collected, knew what they were doing, what have you. This passive. When you talk to the person, was there any sense of, oh crap, what did I just do? And in my generation, it was fear. Did they express any amount of fear when you talked to them because of the actions that they did before?
I understand the question and probably the desire and the curiosity to know.
Well, that gets into my earlier comment about the escalation aspect of it. If there's no fear for the actions, what's the next time? More joy, more rage, whatever that happens to be. There's a logic behind the question.
No, I certainly understand the question and just recognizing that I don't want to provide too much information right now. Yeah.
Law enforcement to put their opinions into reports. We want the facts. We want what they observed, and that should be there. We haven't even received this information yet, so we don't get, or at least I do not get to talk about specific details of open investigations and/or potential prosecutions. Okay? You all have gotten a lot of information most people will not get until we actually have a charging decision. So I would, and I'm always a person who tries to tell law enforcement, less is best because we don't need to be penalized and I don't need to lose my law license because we put out information on specifics that shouldn't be there. And that's typically why you won't see me in these situations with law enforcement, but I thought it was important to be here to hear the impact that this had on you, okay, to hear your concerns so that when we actually do receive the referral, we can get through as quickly as possible and try to figure out what the best road for resolution will be, okay? So I don't want to cut you off, but I would rather not have him give opinions right now. Obviously, we do have members of the media here. This is going to be broadcast, so I would be a little cautious on my part, basically so that I can actually do my job and our office can actually address this. We would not want to have a footfall now where we would be penalized and then don't get to, frankly, hold someone accountable.
And so that goes back to my earlier point too, is that we have to take into account what's best for everyone involved. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with everyone in here with you and talk to you about this situation in different circumstances. But as the district attorney mentioned, and as in order to ensure the integrity of the investigation is the common phrase that you hear, that means a lot more than just that blanket statement. I mean, we are really trying to do what's best for everyone involved and taking into account the impact that this has on the community and see this in the right direction. So
this is a perfectly appropriate role for law enforcement. They need to let you guys know, one, the threat has been addressed, that they feel they have taken care of it, that there isn't something else that you need to worry about immediately. So that's totally what they typically do. I typically am just not standing with them when they have that conversation. You had a question?
Yeah, do you have a time estimate, days, weeks, months before it's publicly known who the person is?
So that I would defer back to the district attorney here. So as this process plays out,
I would assume that we get a referral in the next few days into the week, maybe Monday. I don't know how many reports still need to be transcribed, but as soon as that is up to us, then we will start our work of reviewing, and all of the communications start to go out from our system. So a lot of that is automated once we put the case into Protect, and contact information for those specifically impacted. Those letters start going out now, and people start reaching out, because we would need to make sure that we get the information to you about your rights, about how to exercise your rights at the initial appearance, and some general information about the process. So a lot of it depends on when they send it to us. I would assume that it's coming to us in pretty short order. Yes?
I was a teacher in Verona for 23 years, and I've worked with many kids who have had issues that sound like this person maybe did. So I'm just going to end a little bit with giving you a viewpoint that maybe speaks a little bit to your thing about whether or not you think they showed remorse or anger or whatever. Some of these kids are disturbed and have mental issues that may not look normal because they aren't normal. So you have to not put normal viewpoints on kids who have issues that don't allow that. So just please hold on to that and know that it doesn't sound like this is a quote kid who would fit in a normal situation.
Thank you for that. Also, let's go. Any other questions, concerns? My contact information is up there in the event you do have questions down the road. I, again, appreciate you taking time out of your evening to be a part of this conversation, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for all of your help. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What's that?